Welcome back to Tell Me More Stories Told as Podcast. Today we're going to take a deep dive into something we all use every single day.
Let me guess. Coffee.
Uh-huh. No, but good one. We're going to be talking about calendars.
Calendars.
Calendars, yep. You check it every day, I check it every day. But have you ever thought about where the whole idea even came from?
I have to admit, I don't think about it too often.
Right. I mean, it's just there.
Yeah.
But the history of calendars, well, it's actually super fascinating. Ready for a bit of a time travel adventure?
Okay, you've piqued my interest. Let's do it.
Okay, so first off, we've got these things called solar calendars.
Solar calendars, right. Based on the sun.
Exactly. And get this, the ancient Egyptians, they were some of the first to really figure this out.
They were pretty clever, those Egyptians.
Yeah. So they noticed that the flooding of the Nile River, pretty important event for them, happened around the same time that a certain star, Sirius, would appear.
So they used that as a marker.
Yeah, that was like their starting point for the year, boom.
And then they divided the year into 12 months, 30 days each.
Right. And then at the very end, they just, tacked on 5 extra days.
5 extra days, just like that.
Just like that. Pretty ingenious, right?
It is, but wasn't it a little bit off?
Yeah, you're catching on. A year isn't exactly 365 days, is it?
Nope, there's that extra little bit, a fraction of a day they missed.
And that tiny fraction, well, it adds up over time.
Oh, yeah. Their calendar would have drifted out of sync with the seasons.
Can you imagine? Celebrating your summer solstice in the middle of winter?
That would be, confusing, to say the least.
And that's where leap years come in, our attempt to fix that little discrepancy. But honestly, why February? Why pick on a month that was already so short?
Well, February just drew the short straw, I guess.
Uh-huh. Poor February. Speaking of the Romans, though, wasn't their calendar originally way different from ours?
Oh, yeah, completely different.
Tell me about it.
They actually started with a 10-month calendar.
10 months? Seriously?
Seriously. No January, no February. They just kind of lumped the whole winter period together. Talk about a long winter.
It's like they didn't even acknowledge those cold, dark months.
Well, their lives were very tied to the seasons in agriculture, No board meetings to schedule in January back then.
Yeah, true. But as their civilization got more complex, they realized, 10 months just wasn't going to cut it.
Right. They needed a more refined system. So they added January and February and eventually developed the Julian calendar.
The Julian calendar,
Yeah.
which is actually a big step towards the calendar we use today, the Gregorian calendar.
It's incredible, right? To think we went from a 10-month year to, leap years and all that.
It really shows how our understanding of time, well, it's changed so much.
And calendars, they're more than just practical tools.
What do you mean?
They reflect, a society's values, how they think about time itself.
Okay, so what if we had a completely different calendar system? Would we think about time differently?
That's a fascinating question. Would we even live our lives differently? Who knows?
Whoa, that's getting pretty deep. But hold on, before we go too far down that rabbit hole, we've been talking about solar calendars. But what about those lunar calendars? The ones based on the moon?
Ah, yes, lunar calendars. They're entirely based on the phases of the moon.
So new moons, full moons, all that mystical stuff, right?
Exactly. But, with a lunar calendar, the months aren't really about the Earth going around the sun.
It's about the moon going through its phases, right?
Yeah. And a lunar year, well, it's actually about 11 days shorter than a solar year.
Oh, so if you were planting crops based on a lunar calendar, you'd be in trouble pretty quickly.
You would. Your harvest would be, well, all over the place.
So that's where those lunisolar calendars come in, right? The
Yeah.
ones that try to do both, the sun and the moon.
You got it. The best of both worlds. Or at least they try.
Like a compromise.
Exactly. A good example is the Hebrew calendar, which adds an extra month every so often to keep the holidays aligned with the seasons.
Smart. It's incredible how people came up with all these different systems.
They were trying to make sense of time, of the universe,
And we're just scratching the surface here. There are so many different calendars out there.
Each with its own story to tell.
It's a lot to take in. But before we dive even deeper, a quick reminder to our listeners. If you're enjoying this journey through time, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any future episodes of Tell Me More. We've got so much more to explore together.
Where were we? Ah, yes, the diversity of calendars. Let's talk about those calendars that don't rely on the sun or the moon. The purely artificial ones.
Artificial calendars, you mean made up?
Well, not exactly made up, but they're not based on any natural cycles like the International Fixed Calendar, for example.
I think I've heard of that one. Wasn't there something about 13 months in a year?
That's the one. They tried to make a more, regular and symmetrical calendar, equal length months, the same weekdays every year. It was a planner's dream.
But they never really caught on, did they?
Not really. People seem to be pretty attached to the traditional calendars they're used to, even with all their quirks and inconsistencies.
It's like we like our little bit of chaos, right?
Maybe so. There's something to be said for tradition, even when it comes to something as seemingly logical as a calendar. They're deeply connected to our cultures, religions.
Changing it would be like, I don't know, rewriting history. And speaking of history, we've only just started to explore the world of calendars.
There's so much more to discover, from ancient calendars carved on bones and stones to, well, who knows what the future holds. Maybe calendars for space travel.
Calendars for space travel, wow. That's a thought. But before we go there, I have to share a fun fact.
Oh, a fun fact. I love fun facts. What is it?
Did you know there's actually a World Calendar Association?
World Calendar Association?
Yeah, and they're still advocating for that 13-month world calendar. They haven't given up hope.
Wow, they're really dedicated.
So there you have it. Calendars are more than just a way to schedule your dentist appointments. They're a reflection of our history, our culture, and our never-ending quest to understand the universe and our place in it.
It's true. We often take them for granted, but they really are fascinating.
And that's just the beginning. We'll have to save the rest of this amazing journey for another time. So stay tuned.
I can't wait. Welcome back to Tell Me More Stories Told Us podcast. Before we went to those ads, we were talking about some pretty wild calendar ideas.
Oh yeah, those artificial calendars, like the ones that weren't based on the sun or the moon.
Exactly. Those were some interesting attempts to make calendars more, well, organized.
More symmetrical. But they never really caught on, did they?
Not really, no.
It seems like people, well, they really like their traditional calendars.
Yeah, even with all the quirks and inconsistencies.
Speaking of traditional calendars, we've been focusing a lot on Western systems. What about calendars from other cultures?
Oh, there's a whole world of fascinating calendar systems out there.
Really? Tell me more.
Take the Chinese calendar, for example.
Oh yeah, I've heard of that one.
It's a lunisolar calendar, so it incorporates both the moon and the sun.
And it's been used for thousands of years, right?
Right, and it's closely tied to Chinese astrology and philosophy.
It's amazing how much calendars are a part of a culture, their beliefs and traditions.
It's true. Calendars really reflect a society's worldview, how they perceive time.
It makes you think, like, our calendar is just one way of looking at time.
Exactly. There are so many different ways to measure and understand time.
And each culture has its own unique story to tell about it, right?
Absolutely. It's a testament to human ingenuity and innovation.
It makes you wonder, are there any undiscovered calendar systems out there?
Oh, that's a great question. Maybe hidden in some ancient ruins somewhere.
Imagine that. Deciphering a lost calendar from a long-gone civilization. It would be like unlocking a secret code to their understanding of the universe.
It would be incredible, wouldn't it?
Speaking of discoveries, what about the impact of technology on calendars? I mean, things have changed so much.
Oh, absolutely. Technology has completely revolutionized how we use and think about calendars.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. We've gone from those clunky paper calendars to, smartphone apps and AI assistants.
It's mind-boggling when you really stop to think about it. We can share our schedules instantly, get reminders across all our devices, even access calendars from different time zones with a few taps.
I remember when we used to try to coordinate schedules with those big, bulky paper organizers. It was a nightmare.
I know, but now it's all seamless, integrated into our digital lives.
And AI can practically manage our schedules for us these days, right? Suggesting meeting times, adding appointments, even managing our to-do lists.
It's like having a personal time management assistant in our pocket.
Makes you wonder, will we even need calendars in the future? Will they just become like another background function in our digital lives?
That's an interesting thought. But even with all the advancements, I think calendars will always have a purpose.
Why do you say that?
Well, they provide a framework for organizing our lives, for understanding our place and time, for looking ahead and reflecting on the past.
I see what you mean. There's something inherently human about marking time, planning for the future, setting goals.
Exactly. Calendars are more than just tools. They're a reflection of our hopes, our dreams, our aspirations.
That's a really beautiful way to put it, and I think that's a perfect place to end our discussion for today.
I agree. We've covered a lot of ground, but there's always more to explore.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of calendars. And remember, they're more than just a way to track appointments. They're a window into our past, present, and future.
Until next time.
Welcome back to Tell Me More Stories Told as Podcast. We've been talking about calendars and all the different ways people measure time.
We have, and it's amazing how much variety there is. But, there's one thing we haven't really touched on yet. Time zones.
Time zones. Yeah, good point. Imagine a world without them. It'd be total chaos.
Yeah, it would. Can you imagine trying to schedule a meeting across the world without them? Is it Tuesday there yet or still Monday?
Right. It would be a nightmare. So how did we end up with time zones anyway?
Believe it or not, standardized time zones are actually a fairly recent invention.
Really? They seem so fundamental now.
It wasn't until the late 19th century, with the rise of railroads and telecommunications, that they became necessary.
That makes sense, I guess. Before that, people mostly just used local time, based on the sun's position.
Yeah. If you traveled to the next town, you might have to adjust your watch by a few minutes.
Wow, I never thought of that. But with trains and telegraphs, suddenly those little differences in time became a huge problem.
Exactly. Coordinating train schedules when every town has its own time. Chaos.
So the whole system of time zones was really born out of a need for, well, practicality.
It was. But it also reflects a change in how we think about time. We went from a more local, personal sense of time to this global, synchronized system. It's pretty profound when you think about it.
It is. Time zones have really helped to connect the world.
They have. We take them for granted now, but they've made global communication and travel so much easier. And who knows, maybe we'll see even more innovations in timekeeping in the future.
Like what?
Well, maybe personalized time zones, or a universal cosmic time standard for space travel.
Wow, that's getting pretty futuristic.
It is, but it's fun to imagine the possibilities. But for now, I think we should appreciate just how far we've come in our understanding of time. From those early attempts to track the sun and moon to these intricate systems of calendars and time zones.
It's incredible, isn't it? All because humans wanted to make sense of time. And, I think that's a perfect note to end on. It's been a fascinating journey exploring the world of calendars and timekeeping.
It has. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
And to all our listeners out there, thanks for listening to Tell Me More Stories Told as Podcast. We'll catch you next time.